So, good morning, Tim.
Good afternoon.
Um, Good evening for me, right?
Well, I guess it's morning. It's still just a bit after 11. Yes.
Right, and as we say in Russian, "Доброе время суток" or "good time of
Uh,
the day" to whoever is watching. Today we are in for a real treat. We have somewhat of a celebrity, at least in the polyglot community, Dr. Tim Keely. Who I actually have never met before. Just heard of him and was Facebook friends with him, but we never talked before. So I did read a
we
little bit
have seen
about
each
him
other online though before. We've
oh,
been in discussions together before,
online, yes, but yeah, not
not in person.
yeah,
Right.
not in person. Hopefully soon at some polyglot gathering.
Yeah.
Dr. Tim Keely is, I assume, from the United States, just judging by the
Oh,
accent.
actually, I'm a Japanese citizen,
Right,
uh,
right, right,
but originally from Florida. But I lived most of my life in Japan, 45 years. I'm an immigrant.
right. And you are a professor. I called you doctor. I guess you have a PhD, and you're
Well, yes. Uh, I'm a retired professor, so I'm 70 years old. So I retired at 66, and I taught here in Japan and also in Shanghai, Taipei, and Bangkok. Uh, I taught cross-cultural management.
yeah. I was wondering
I,
what it is. I've never heard of such discipline. Could you enlighten
Well,
us?
cross-cultural management basically is how to manage or work with people from a different culture. So, for example, a Japanese company in China or in France or wherever it be, you talk about how things are different in terms of doing business and management. When it comes to management, basically, that's everything. That's how you communicate formally and informally, attitude towards time. For example, Japanese are very strict towards time, etc. Things like that.
Is it
So I taught in Japanese, Chinese, Thai, and a few other languages here and there,
Sorry,
but
I'll
mainly.
occasionally interrupt you because just because we have little time, so I want to fit in as many questions as I can. As far as cross-cultural management, I've never heard of that discipline before. Is it like a well-established discipline, or is something you
Well,
came up
it's
with, or
it's it's a very well established discipline, but there are not that many professors because it's not always offered at all universities. They might call it international management. It might go under, different names, but basically, in order to teach it, you have to have a lot of experience, and I would say not just in culture and business, but in language. And
well,
I've worked in international business. I worked for General Electric in corporate marketing, and I worked for an American paper company here in Japan at the Tokyo office.
I think if we start going over your bio, this 35-minute Zoom window that we have
It'd be
will
long.
not suffice. Well, we might record another segment, maybe. We'll see how we'll manage with time. But I just want to uh, go to what to me is the most impressive part of your bio. And you wrote a book entitled A Life in 30 Languages. So you speak at least 30 languages. And you've been to 99 countries. I'm sure more since probably you'll tell us since the book was
102 now.
written. How many?
102 now.
All right, so and counting. All right, so let's first start with languages and how did you manage to get into it and how did you accumulate so many? And then maybe we'll speak a few so people can make sure.
Okay, so when I was 18, I spoke English and Spanish. And my Spanish was very good because I grew up in South Florida and I had a lot of Cuban friends. So I spoke Cuban style Spanish, and I started university at 16. I took what they call the CLEP test. It gave me 2 years university credit. So I went to Colombia at 18. And in Bogota, I studied at Universidad de los Andes. And I also studied French at Alliance Française and German at Goethe Institute and Portuguese at Instituto Brasileiro. And so that really was the beginning of my polyglot journey, because at age 18, was fluent in two languages, and I was taking on three more at the same time in Spanish, learning in Spanish. And then after a trip around South America, I went to school in Switzerland. I studied international relations in French. And I also used a lot of German traveling around. The next language, I had actually met somebody in South America who spoke Slovene. So my first Slavic language was Slovene. Drugi slovenski jezik je bio srpsko-hrvatski. So I learned Serbo-Croatian as my second language traveling through Yugoslavia. And then I was in the Soviet Union from 1978, my first time, and then numerous times after 81 since emig from the time I immigrated to Japan. And I was just recently in Russia 2 years ago to appear on a talent show.
All right, I
Uh,
actually saw you in that show, and I wanted to ask you about it, but maybe a bit
yeah,
later we have time. Ну, чтобы
okay.
не отвлекаться так уже от русского языка, ну, скажите
Да.
что-нибудь по-русски, чтобы мы почувствовали,
No,
что
no,
вы
no.
говорите.
Я тоже был I think maybe we should keep it in English rather than put
No,
some.
no, it's okay. We could do it a little
No,
bit of different languages, and I will
okay.
translate. I'll translate, or you'll translate as after
No,
you speak some.
też byłem w Polsce 2 lata, w Poznaniu. And so actually Polish is my strongest Slavic language since I spoke it every day and read Polish literature and Russian literature, Croatian literature. And so then I studied the rest of the Slavic languages, all the major ones like Czech, Slovak, Bulgarian, Ukrainian, etc. Over the years since then. And as you know, as a Slavic speaker, it's much Slavic languages are one big continuum. So once you know languages at the various endpoints, you just sort of move towards the middle, which would be Slovak.
Right, and it's interesting that we now have a conflict that some people say over the language somewhat, and it would be very easy to solve with just learn the two languages, and
Right.
you would. Uh,
Is your
uh,
mother tongue Ukrainian or Russian?
what's that? My
Is
mother
your
tongue.
mother tongue?
My mother tongue is Russian, as
Hmm.
with most Soviet Jews. But я розмовляю українською мовою теж, і може ви щось скажете українською, щоб ми почули, що ви розмовляєте?
Окей. Ну, розумію дуже українську мову, але не говорю добре. I mean, it's more passive because I didn't spend as much time speaking Ukrainian. Actually, when I was in Kiev, people were speaking Russian because this is Soviet times. And now, because of the conflict, people don't want to speak Russian anymore, even people who speak it at home as a mother tongue. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, but the Slavic languages, I mean, this is a whole nother story, as you know, and I've made videos about it. Slavic languages is an area of conflict, and this is not the only one, Ukrainian, Russian. That's has a long, long history. You also have big conflicts in the south with Bulgarian, and they call their northern Macedonia Macedonian
But
dialect, and then between the Serbs and the Croats and the Bosnians, on and on and on. But anyhow, to answer your question a little bit, I don't want to go through my whole bio, but let's just say so. I went through the Romance language, Germanic languages, Slavic languages, and then I started with the Asian languages, and then when in Poland actually from 1979 and studying Japanese. And then I came to Japan, and basically I've been in Japan most of the time since 1981. And then I studied Chinese literature here. I learned other languages I taught in Thailand, and I did my PhD research involving Thai. So I learned to read, write, and speak Thai well. Vietnamese, of course, Malay, Lao, Indonesian, Malay, then later Nepali and Hindi, and on and on. So it's just a matter of, I think it's a matter of time. I mean, when I say 30, I chose 30 languages for the title because I've counted, I've studied 53 to some extent. Okay. So, but just because you study the language, if you haven't used it enough, you don't have really that active ability. And I've studied them at various levels. For example, Hebrew, I haven't studied that much. I really like Hebrew. I love Farsi. So, and now they have to be fighting each other. Hopefully,
ب- بوني
they'll
بوني
become
دبر
agreed.
بريت
Yeah, yeah,
يخلينا
yeah.
دبر
Yeah,
بريت
je
قلبي
me kusate vrit.
why
Um,
not.
but yeah, so um, I say 30 because those are languages which I have a very high level of understanding. It's really hard to say whether that's a B1, B2, or A1 or C1 or C2, etc. Because I think the problem with that system is the domains. In certain domains, I know a lot because either I taught about that or for example, some languages spoken like in the Himalayas, like Tamang, Sherpa. I concentrated learning the language dealing with trekking. So, I don't know some simple words here or there, but I know words that matter to me, you see. So, it's really hard to pick a number, as you know.
So we can gently switch to traveling. Well, there's more to tell there since 102 countries. That's pretty impressive. I've watched before we started talking your little video where you describe being in certain countries at critical time in their history, like Poland
Yeah,
during
yeah, yes, yes.
Solidarity, the Soviet Union when Brezhnev died. What do you think was the most interesting historical moment that you experienced on on your journeys?
Well, let's go to the scariest. The scariest
Scariest?
uh, was in Ushuaia, Argentina. So that's Tierra del Fuego, where I was walking from the airport with a Canadian I met on a plane coming from Bariloche. And as we passed by the police station, a policeman pointed a machine gun at us and said, "Che, veni." And so, good Argentinian. Uh, so I went up there, and then they took us in the police station, and they interrogated us for more than 24 hours, putting us in the separate cells and bringing us out. And it was kind of scary, but it actually is more scary afterwards. Because when I say afterwards, many years afterwards, when it came out that that was the time of the desaparecidos, when the government they had just arrested Isabel Perón and put her in Bariloche in March, which is June, and they were killing many young people. So yeah,
So,
and I would say interesting ones. I mean, Solidarność in Poland,
right.
because I'd studied Norwegian in Poland also, and so I took a trip during the summer to Norway and Sweden, and coming back from Malmö by ferry boat to Swinoujscie, Swinemünde in German, and well, something was going on. See all these flags everywhere, and we weren't docking right away, and they said, "Sto," there's a strike going on. So what's this? And Gdańsk, the whole, Przedmorze, the whole area along the coast there, from Gdańsk going to Świnoujście, Gdynia, etc. They were on strike, and the Lech Wałęsa was giving his speeches and on and on. So I witnessed the birth of solidarity, and I lived through it for another year before I left to go to Japan. So that was a very interesting one, especially when I look back in perspective. I would say so historic moment, yeah, when Brezhnev died, I was in Azerbaijan. The train stopped and I asked why, and they said Brezhnev Umar, and I said, Что? And then the person agreed with me, but they put on the face like they were serious. And and it was like, it was a time, the Soviet Union was a very interesting time for me. Russia, I saw when I went on the Stalin show, and everything had changed. I mean, GUM was a very elegant department store, and people were dressed up nice and fancy, and you could, the breakfast at the hotel was amazing, and you had food. Everything was quite different.
So you haven't
So
been to
yeah,
Russia since the 80s until 2024?
yeah, I had not been to Russia since
Yeah.
when would be the last time? It would be probably 82. Um, yeah, so what, around 41 or 42 years had passed. Yeah.
So I just want to delve a little bit into politics, since actually that's what prompted our conversation, but I'll get to that a bit later. But what I want to ask is, you went to Russia during this war. Basically, you
Yes.
went to a
And come,
country which many consider the country
yeah,
aggressor,
right.
and went on their national TV. So was it just
Okay,
like
so for
for
me, this is at first, I thought, should I publish it or not? Okay, so of course, I'm very much against the war in Ukraine, but so are many Russians, so are most Russians. And so I set the politics aside. For me, I wanted to see Moscow again. And this was an interesting opportunity about languages. And yeah, I got a lot of criticism about it. But me being on TV, talking about languages, I think did nothing that would affect what was going on. And so I'm not into this kind of symbolism. We have a lot of symbolism all around. You have a lot of people protesting on the streets saying things they know nothing about. And so I'm, I love, I simply say I love Russia, the people, the culture, etc. I love Ukraine, the people, culture, etc. Of course, I hate the war. So, for me, um, I didn't, I didn't see the ways of protest. There is one well-known polyglot who was going to interview me, and then I said, "Okay, we'll speak these languages," and I said, "We'll speak Russian." And I said, "Когда говорим по-русски, я буду говорить, как был, когда я был в Москве, да-да-да." And then, it was like, oh his underling canceled the meeting and said, doesn't want to have anything to do with this. Um, yeah, that was, well, I feel like saying his name because he pissed me off. That was Steve Kaufman. And so I've known him for a long time. I said, okay, I mean, um, I don't see it that way. I don't run my politics at where I visit. I've been visiting China since right after the Cultural Revolution, from 1981 till now. Vietnam, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, this was after the Vietnam War. Um, but remember, yeah, I've experienced all these conflicts over. I'm a child of the '60s, born in 1956, so '60s and '70s.
when this war started? It's very close to me. I'm partly because I'm from Odessa, from Ukraine, but I don't think only because of that, because I generally saw an injustice. I saw no reason for this war at all, at
Yeah.
all. Whatever the reasons might be put forward, they don't justify war.
Oh,
And
definitely.
and I don't think that they're legitimate reasons, but I don't know if we should get into
Yeah, no,
that.
no, I don't argue with that at all. But I don't see my visit to the area as, for example, I was just in Nepal last November trekking, and it was very interesting. I've been trekking in Nepal for 30 years. And this is the first time that the majority of languages I spoke to non-Nepalis, to trekkers, who were basically, let's say, of European descent, white, um, were Slavic languages. So number one was Czech. There were more Czechs than anybody else. And then the second one was Russians or Ukrainians.
Mhm.
And especially I made a big group of Ukrainian and Poles and Croatians and yeah, and Slovenes, etc. And so it was very interesting meeting this group of Ukrainians because um, so I was, speaking Russian because I speak Russian much, much better than I speak Ukrainian. I said, no, you go ahead, speak Ukrainian. And then one guy's off to the side and he starts telling me, he said, yeah, we don't want to speak Russian. He said, yes, that's what I speak at home. And so you know what it's like, right? It's a very sensitive issue and it's tied into language in one sense, but um, I see it more than that. It's not really language. It's more of an excuse. I see it as land grabbing, and also I see it as, those you have ethnicities living everywhere. For example, you know that in this area, the majority were Russians, and then you have um, for example, let's take the Kurds, for example. They live in many different countries like Turkey and Iran and Iraq, but they don't have their own country. And then some places, they're persecuted, etc. So, their language and culture differences sometimes become the excuse for war. But was what happened down in Yugoslavia. It's more complicated than that. And I believe that this war is also more complicated than that. But also I believe it's stupid, obviously.
I don't think I think this war is very simple, and you've mentioned the word land grabbing. We could stop at that. I don't think there was an issue of a language issue or like an issue of being trying to be like separatism issue in Ukraine. There was no such issue. Even in Crimea, there was no issue at all, and not to mention Donbass, which is no was
Yeah.
no different from any other predominantly Russian speaking area. The fact that the area is Russian speaking does not at all mean that they want to secede, they want to separate, and all that. So I don't think it's an issue, and it's not even an issue now because people do speak Russian in Ukraine. There is like it's politicized, obviously, because Russian is associated with aggression, and Russia, if Russia wanted to bring or to preserve its language, that's not how you do it.
No, no.
You can only it's only counterproductive. So I don't even blame Ukrainians from renaming the streets, from
Yeah. I
erecting
don't know if you've
from
ever
for
watched my video on that though, when I talk about Ukrainian and Russian and the origin, the coming basically from Rus, from Kievsky Rus. And
right.
so actually Belarusian, Russian, and Ukrainian have the same origin, and which is modern day in the territory, which is modern day Ukraine. I don't, sorry, modern day Ukraine. I have a problem with the name of the country because people really got on my case. I was so used to always putting an article before the name, Ukraine. It feels naked without it because I'm from this, the Soviet times, and now they don't like that. But anyhow, this whole area here is basically the cradle of the main Slavic speakers because the main Slavic speakers in the world are the Russians, the Ukrainians, and the Poles.
It's true, but you know, this argument is used, this common origin argument is used to, at least by Russia, to deny Ukrainians their identity. That Putin, the only thing he
Yeah,
does,
they
he
call
can
they
talk
call it
so he
the
can
little
talk so much
Russian.
about NATO and you know
Yeah,
NATO expansion and this and that, but when he comes to all this for all his interviews, all he talks about, he brings some old you know scrolls. From 14th century and tries to prove something that way. You know, that I think that has you know nothing to do with what is actually happening.
no,
But
no, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. But my point is, it's a very, very complicated situation, and that when it comes to the culture and language, this is nothing new. It goes back to Peter the Great, and so you know, there's been many times that there's been conflict, and you can see what happened to Belarusian. You know, basically that's the closest to Ukrainian, or if you think Ruthenian, whether you call it a language or a dialect, might
yeah,
be the closest. But it depends on which Ruthenian. And actually in Polish, that's Ruski język, because Rosyjski is the word for Russian.
right.
Um, so yeah, again, I don't look at this present conflict as justifiable, of course, and necessarily stemming from language and culture, because as you said, there was no really big difference. And during Soviet times, Kiev was predominantly Russian speaking. And you know, when you got to Lvov, um, you know, then you got more Ukrainian speaking. So I love to see the renewal and the new interest in speaking Ukrainian and teaching Ukrainian, et cetera, et cetera. Um, you know, that's perhaps one of the one of the uh, one of the few, if are there any positive things that happened through this conflict, not the war, just the conflict itself, you know, what they're saying. But no, I see it really was more land grabbing.
Right. So, and now we'll come to this to the reason that prompted this conversation. Because I mean, I should tell you that I'm now rather pleased with what you said, and it comes a bit of a surprise after the other surprising statement that you made. On my Facebook, I published a photo near Trump
Yeah,
Hotel.
I actually forget exactly what you wrote. Could you remind me? And
I
maybe
did
we
not
never.
write. I did not write anything. I just wrote I wrote New York reacts and posted a photo where I did not write that on the ground, but someone wrote "Bye bye Orban, come on Hungary." I guess it was still before the results were announced. People were hoping for Orban to go, and then I didn't get any comments there besides yours. And you wrote, "What are you hoping for? More Muslim immigrants? That would be strange coming from a Ukrainian Jew." And I was really so shocked. I like didn't know you. Didn't
Okay,
know much what
so
you stand for, but I thought that the person who speaks 30 languages, who's been to 99
okay,
countries,
so let
would
me
not
explain that.
say such
Yeah,
a
and
thing.
also a professor of cross-cultural management.
Right, right. So
So yeah, yeah, okay.
where does that
So
come
no,
from?
no, okay, yeah, oh, good. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to explain where that's coming from. Um, so yes, I also studied Arabic, and you know, I speak Urdu quite well. I was 44 days in Pakistan last June and July. So I've been to many Muslim cultures. I am not against Islam. I am not against Judaism. I am not against Christianity, any of these per se. What I do know from my observations and my experience of living in different cultures is that uh, problems can occur when people do not adapt. And so you can see, for example, in Japan now, we have people, we have to have more and more people from different cultures because our population is decreasing. And the one that the new prime minister is pointing to is saying, look, with the Muslims who want to bury the people, he said, we don't bury in Japan. There's no law against it, but 99.8% do not bury because we don't have the land for it, so we cremate. And you put all the urns in the grave and things like that. And so, starts saying you have to adapt, you have to adapt. And what I see going on in Europe is where there's non-adaptation and there are many problems that are occurring. And so my feeling is that those people do not belong there. That if they're willing to adapt and change, fine. But if not, no. And statistically, we can see what happened, like in Poland, where, again, I'm not right wing at all. Actually, for a long time, people considered me left wing, but I guess I'm very flexible in my views. I base it on my experience and knowledge, and not following a certain line of politics.
But let me ask you,
And so yes, no,
open.
I'm against. I am against large immigration from any single culture that does not adapt and changes. And
Let me
uh,
ask you about the United States. You subscribe to the same view, or United States can allow for greater latitude or
well,
cultural
see,
latitude for people?
The United States is actually um, after it began to be settled by European stock, and then import of slaves and on and on. The mix got greater and greater and greater. And then when the idea is, the land of the free, and then there were more and more immigrants. But of course, the United States has always had issue with large immigrants groups. You pick on one, you pick on another. I mean, one has been persistent, and that is with dark-skinned people. And then another one was okay, it was Italians and it was Irish and whatever. Whenever they came over, they got attacked at first. And the Jews had also their issues. They weren't always welcome with open arms and as promised. And so you can see that United States to a great extent, Canada, uh, Australia to a certain extent, that they are facing a different situation because this type of multiculturalism has really become the fabric of the country, but not without conflict, not without issues. And I wouldn't blame ever one certain group. Like, for example, Trump. I've always been anti-Trump. And when I see uh, what he would say about the Mexicans, et cetera, just blaming it on certain groups, this is totally ridiculous. Okay. All right. Now let's go back to the comment that I made. But Europe is in a very special position right now. And that is uh, you're
But
having a backlash. You're
but
having a
it,
backlash that when my comment is like what can happen from your own past, you know what you know what can happen when if you go see I don't know which direction their policy will go in terms of like an open border, etc. But it's part of the EU, it's part of the Schengen. They automatically have an open border.
But it wasn't, this election was not about Muslim or the immigrant issue. It was about the Russian-Ukraine issue. That was what Orban made it about. So I don't know why you've decided to highlight
Okay,
some
that's
other.
that's interesting. I wasn't aware of that perspective. Could you explain it to me?
Well, Orban was very pro-Russian and basically called himself Putin's mouse. Quoting
Okay.
the story when the lion was saved by a mouse, some kind of Aesop fable, and that was all about that. So and the Hungarians, in en masse went on the streets in Budapest. It was chanting Russians go home. So to me, it was an election about that.
Yeah.
But the issue that you brought up, unfortunately, we don't have time to discuss right now. I also would disagree, and there is a lot to discuss. But thank you very much, and then maybe we'll continue because we're out of time, and I want to end
Okay.
smoothly. So thank you very
Yeah.
much, Tim, and we'll be in touch. It was great to get to know you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.